right now, as Geoff Mosher writes about over at InsideTheBirds.com, Nakobe Dean, Liz Frank sprain going to the injured reserve. Does that mean he is done for the year? What does that mean at that position? We'll dive into that and more coming up here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN as Geoff Mosher joins us here on the Bash. As Moshe is back, what's going on, Geoff Mosher? How are you, pal?
Good. How are you?
All is well, man. I know that we're at the bye week here, but news happening. Let's start with the news today as the Eagles, Nakobe Dean. We found out that foot injury now for the second time. The foot, it's a Liz Frank sprain. Now, sprain, does that mean he's out for the year, or is there some possibility that he could return?
Well, I imagine he's going to get a couple of opinions on this and see what he's going to be able to do. It depends on the severity of the sprain, as I understand it, Mike. In fact, we had you had Dr. Chow on yesterday, didn't you?
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, he was on with us on Inside the Birds about a month ago after Nakobe first had the injury. And what he said was, even though it was a 4-week injury, which the team was relieved about, it doesn't mean it wasn't a Liz Frank sprain. It just meant it wasn't the most severe Liz Frank sprain. So this one could be more severe and then be the one that requires more treatment. So we'll just have to wait and see and hear what kind of feedback he gets back.
So he missed time earlier. He comes back. Now he's going to miss some time again. That means Nick Morrow. So I guess the question I have for you is, they're at the bye week. A lot of self-evaluation, self-scouting. You go over everything. Was that an area that the Eagles needed to go over regardless of Nakobe Dean? Whether or not they were better off with Morrow over Dean, was that something you think that maybe they were looking at?
Possibly. I think that maybe also in how they were going to use Nakobe Dean. I noticed watching the All-22 yesterday, and it struck me a little bit, but even more so in review, that he was used as a blitzer 3 or 4 times before he got hurt. And that's a role that he did in college a lot more than dropping into coverage or man coverage or zone coverage. So there were a couple of drops that he had in coverage that did not turn out well for him in that game. The blitzing, more natural to him. So I don't think the plan would have been to shelf Nakobe Dean. I think they want to see him grow and improve and get used to their defense. But part of me wonders if he would, going forward, would have been more involved in blitz packages as opposed to dropping into man or zone on third down and pressure downs.
Yeah, so we'll see. I guess, for the foreseeable future, Nick Morrow, I would imagine, do they have to now look outside the organization to bring in a third guy, or is there somebody within the building that will now be elevated and be a part of the linebacking core?
Well, you're okay with Morrow and Cunningham right now, but your depth at that position now is sorely tested. If one of those two guys were going to hurt, you've got Christian Ellis, who really has not been a factor this year. Ben Van Sumeren was already elevated this past game for one game to play special teams. Not sure they're ready to put him on. I don't think he played a snap of defense. I'm pretty sure he did not. So wouldn't surprise me if they wound up bringing a veteran onto the practice squad just to have. You remember last time, it seems like a hot minute, right? That Rashawn Garrett, who was it? Rashawn, why can't I remember his freaking name? Evans, the former Titans linebacker. He had signed with the Eagles for like 3 days, right?
Right.
And then I guess he wanted to sign somewhere else. I don't even know if he ever did wind up signing. Maybe he did. I don't know. But they did. So they brought a backup, a veteran to the practice squad last time this happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again.
That would be interesting to see if they go. They also was that this year they had Miles Jack here too, so it was apparent that they were trying to find more linebacking depth. Right? They had Miles.
Yeah, I mean, look, they didn't have Zach. They signed Zach Cunningham at the same time that they signed Miles Jack.
Right,
so,
exactly.
And Zach Cunningham has probably been their best linebacker this year.
Well, I mean, Dean and Morrow, Dean was here, he got hurt, he left, Morrow came in, played well, then he was out, then Morrow was then Dean was back in. We were saying earlier that Zach Cunningham's probably been the best free agent signing that they've had this year. There hasn't been very many to match him up against. I said, well, Morrow, when he's played, has been pretty good. The problem is he hasn't really, gotten the same reps that Cunningham has gotten.
Yeah, and Cunningham is clearly their best run defending linebacker, even with Morrow on the field. He made two really good, very significant tackles against the Cowboys on some runs that held Pollard down. He's covering well. Someone, a personnel source told me, I think Zach Cunningham is maybe covering better than all three of them, which has not always been his forte. So he's playing at a pretty high level. That's good. He's giving the Eagles what they need at that position. It's amazing because, like we just said, he wasn't even signed until August, along with Miles Jack. But he's really played well, and that's good. But you always have to be concerned now that if he or Morrow were to get hurt, like, where do you turn?
There's no question that answer might not be on the current team right here, and that's what the bye week's for. Hey, you watch the tape. What do we need to do? What do we need to fix? Let's look at Sean Desai. What are some of the things you think he's looking at right now as they get ready for this back end of the season?
I think he's, probably asking Bradley Roby this week to not go anywhere, stay in a bubble wrap himself within a bubble, and just come back healthy. Because I don't see a whole lot of things that Sean Desai can do to make his defense better with the personnel that he has right now. In fact, to win a couple of games here, when you're playing Sidney Brown and Eli Ricks alternating in the slot, right? When you're playing Kevin Byard at safety, the entire defense, when he just got here, you're surviving right now in the fact that you have a ferocious front four rush, and it's been working out really well. I mean, maybe, Mike, when he looks at the tape and maybe he says, I don't need to play this much man defense. I've played more man defense than Jonathan Gannon, and it certainly hurt us at times against CeeDee Lamb and some others. Perhaps he plays a little bit more zone. But I don't know other than that, what else he can do other than maybe try to create some different pressure schemes to continue to get at quarterbacks.
Defensive line, you've got Reddick and Sweat and Carter and Davis and Fletcher and that group. I was asking yesterday, in this second half of the year, do you think it's like basketball. Does he tighten up his rotations in the second half, or does he expand them more to keep these guys fresher in the second half of the year? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't try to fix what's not broken. So, he is starting to get Nolan Smith on the field a little bit. You saw Derek Barnett didn't play at all against the Cowboys, or I think he was inactive, if I'm not mistaken. So, little by little, they are doing different things, trying to get the young guys in, trying to get Brandon Graham in on certain situations that aren't just edge rusher. So, the bread and butter of his defense is the front four and keeping it fresh. And Jordan Davis, he does get in there on some third down, so it's not always Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox and Milton Williams gets in there. So I think he's doing all right there. If anything, maybe he just thinks of, he starts drawing up some different twists and stunts and line games and overloads and things. But other than that, I wouldn't change too much.
All right, let's go some self-scouting on Brian Johnson's side of the ball. He watches the first 9 games this year, Geoff Mosher. What is he taking a look at that he wants to improve on?
Yeah, I mean, if the bye were like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we would say you got to go and check your red zone offense and figure out what the issue is there. But they've been pretty good over the last few weeks at that. So they seem to have rectified that issue. I would say that he would have to look at how they're running the ball, how they can do it effectively or more effectively without Jalen Hurts being part of the running game, which he's, unless he's much better coming out of the bye and you want to start that again. But even when he was healthy earlier this year, we were talking about how he's not looking to run the ball as much, and how to get DeAndre Swift, I would say, to continue to get him involved in the passing game, especially without Dallas Goedert, right? You're going to need like a couple of new wrinkles and new options of moving the chains with a number 3 guy, whether that's more looks for Julio Jones or Olamide Zaccheaus, or it's just more to Gainwell and DeAndre Swift out of the backfield, whatever it is. That'll probably be on his menu this week.
What do you make of the running backs at this stage? Obviously they didn't make a trade. They stuck with what they got here. Is the running game not unlocked for you because of the backs, the line, the scheme, Hurts? What do you make of that position and that part of their offense?
I'm not that worried about it. And yet I'm the one who's pointing out every show that we do that over the last 3 or 4 weeks they're like 31st in yards per carry average, right? So clearly they're not as impactful.
Which, by the way, Moshe, is crazy from where they were the first 4 weeks of the year.
Yes.
I mean, the first 4 weeks of the year, this was an elite. They ran 88 times in week 3 and 4. They had 88 carries, and they were ripping off yards. They were handing yards. You get yards, and you get yards. I mean, it was crazy. And now they have no yards to be found.
Well, that tends to be what happens in the NFL. Once you start excelling at something, all the tape that you get, right, all the opponents do is try to take that away from you. And then as they're running on, what happens? Well, then A.J. Brown started going on a tear of 6 straight games with 125-yard receiving games. So that's okay. You're willing to say, hey, look, if you're going to dedicate more resources to stopping the run, then we're going to throw the ball on you. And that's what the Eagles did. I mean, I still remember that Minnesota game where it's like Brian Flores didn't care if they were. He put like 5 guys in the box, 2 of them being linebackers, and said, here, try to stop the run. And the Eagles were like, ha, dare you? Okay, you're not going to be able to do it, and they weren't. But now Dallas played a lot of big fronts. I mean, they really put a lot of energy into stopping the run because they're more confident in their back end to be able to hold up and man and certain coverages, which for the most part, Dallas did a good job, I would say. There are sometimes they didn't, and that's when the Eagles were able to cash in. That's what makes it a great game between 2 really good teams. But, yeah, the teams are going to try to take the Eagles' run game out. And then, I don't think the Eagles have to do a whole lot differently because then they can pass the ball on these teams. But I just think from schematic purposes, and you started to see it against Dallas, there was a lot of pulling linemen. There was a lot of trapping. I just think their overall look of their run game probably could use a little bit more spice to it, whereas earlier in the year it was inside zone, because nobody was really stopping it.
Geoff Mosher, we've been asking people throughout the day here, our listeners as well, the 2023, who are the 2023 Eagles?
Who are the 2023 Eagles? You mean like what's their identity?
Yeah, just, in general, the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles are?
Yeah, they're a Swiss Army knife. That I think both offensively and defensively, they have adjusted from week to week to do things differently and win games in completely different styles. Last year, they blew a lot of teams out. This year, I think much like a Swiss Army knife, they're pretty bad. Anybody who ever owned a Swiss Army knife probably lost it 3 times outside their backyard, found it, and was still able to use it, right? Because that's how durable those knives were. So same thing with the Eagles. They've lost a ton of player personnel to injury. They've played a ton of close games, and they've figured out a way 8 times out of 9 to win it, and in different fashions. So that's how I think they are the most multidimensional team in the NFL.
And see, I have said, this team has embraced being winning uncomfortably. Whereas they're saying, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. And we don't see that a lot of times in the NFL. It's, hey, the Chiefs are this, and they're a high-flying offense, and their defense is okay, but Patrick Mahomes is kind of – the Eagles are kind of like, as you kind of said, Swiss – kind of a different way of saying, they're just but they've embraced it, though. They're saying, this is who we are. We're grimy. We're going to fight. And if you want to beat us, Miami, you're going to have to fight us. And Miami says, well, yeah. I don't want to fight. I want to be the guy who pokes the bear, but I don't want to fight with you. And they end up losing.
Right.
So I feel like the 2023 Eagles have embraced winning uncomfortably.
Yeah, and I think that is something that they were mentally prepared for from the start. So I think you can appreciate that both Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts set that tone in training camp when they kept saying last year is last year. This is a new year. This is a new team. This is a new identity. Not everything is going to be like last year. So while they're 8-1, and you can't listen to Eagles content, you can't read or absorb or consume any form of Eagles content without seeing, hearing, or viewing the phrase, but last year, or they're not the same as last year, or they're more vulnerable than last year. The Eagles already knew that. And they told you they weren't the same team as last year. And they told you it's going to be different this year. And yet it's like, people still can't escape the idea, well, man, this just doesn't look like last year's team. Something's wrong with Brian Johnson. Something's wrong with Sean Desai. No, they're 8-1. There's something wrong with every single team in the NFL.
Well,
right? The Ravens are awesome, but they're 7-2.
That's the thing is many fans, especially if you're kind of like in our age range, you grew up at a time where there was elite teams, and your measure of success is this greatness that doesn't exist anymore. The contemporaries to the Eagles wish they were the Eagles. They're not saying they got problems. They're saying we got more problems. We're not close to where they are. That's the problem. Our standards of success go back to what we remember. Those standards are out the window. Their new standards have now, and the Eagles are at the top of the standard chart.
They most certainly are. Now, where they'll be in 6 weeks after their reign of terror schedule, who knows? But to me, it wouldn't make a difference if they lost 1 or 2 games. It just means that they're human beings, human team, just like the other teams in the league that already have 2 or 3 losses that you expect to be really good, whether that's the Bengals, whether that's the Chiefs, whether it's the Dolphins. The Ravens have 2 losses, right? The Ravens are putting up some defensive metrics right now, Mike, that, like some advanced stats on defense that compare to the 2000 Ravens. I mean, that's how good they've been on defense. And, oh, by the way, Lamar Jackson's playing amazingly too, and their offense is really good. They've lost 2 games.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. They scored 37 points last week against Seattle, and it's almost like nobody paid attention because it was like on at 1 o'clock. The Eagles played Dallas. Right. But here's Baltimore saying, we were talking about this earlier, how many teams? I have 6 legitimate Super Bowl contenders that if one of these 6 won the Super Bowl, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, somebody else could win it, and I'd say, wow, I'm surprised. But I have 6. Philly, Kansas City, Cincinnati, San Francisco, Jacksonville, Baltimore. They're my 6.
I think that's a pretty good 6 right there. I would probably, and if your 6 was who?
No particular order. I'm not ranking them. Philadelphia, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, San Francisco, Jacksonville.
Yeah, see, now Jacksonville, right, I know that's not your order, but Jacksonville is the one team where you say if you had to take them out, you could replace them with a Dallas, a Detroit, maybe.
Well, I say this, Moshe. I didn't rank them.
No, that's probably it.
I didn't rank them, but I say Jacksonville wouldn't shock me if they won the Super Bowl because of Peterson. He's won a Super Bowl as the coach, and they have the talent. They're going to be in a good seeding situation, I think, so they're going to get home games. Whereas Detroit, I think they have to win some playoff games before I start to say, okay, if they won the Super Bowl, I'm not shocked. I think if they won the Super Bowl, I'd be pretty surprised. Now, they could. I think they could. Dallas, same thing. I think Dallas could win the Super Bowl, but I just seen them make so many mistakes so many times that you're just waiting for them. It's like the Sixers. Like, oh, Embiid's going to get hurt this year. Well, Dak Prescott's not going to be able to perform in the big moment. Like, to me, I've seen the act too many times, and if they win the Super Bowl, I'd be surprised if they don't get in the way of themselves. The problem with Dallas for me will be this.
That's a good point.
The problem with Dallas for me will be this,
Dallas, Buffalo, and Miami, that they're all very talented teams that can win on any given Sunday, but until they show you that they're not going to fall over themselves in a big game, then you don't give them the benefit.
Miami and Buffalo, all good. Here's the problem I'm going to have with Dallas, Miami, and Buffalo. Why I don't feel the same way about Jacksonville. Right now, Dallas is going to have to go on the road and win 3 times, and that's not happening. It's just not happening, okay? So if they won the division, I change my mind. The problem with them losing that game is they're 2.5 games back, And then winning the division is like last year, slim chance now. And if they don't get home games, I think Dallas, you're asking them now to win 3 times on the road, and I just don't think that happens. It's a nice story.
I can understand that sentiment. I agree. And especially Miami, too, with that track speed. You just never know in a winter location. Can they bring that to, Philadelphia or somewhere else that's, Detroit, somewhere where it's cold? I know Detroit's inside. But, and win a game. That would be a question.
Although Jared Goff has played in a Super Bowl, should I give them more credit?
There you go.
He at least has performed, unlike Prescott. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can listen to on any podcasting platform. And, of course, check out the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. You guys got a week off this week. No pregame show. You do anything special for the bye week there?
A week off from the pregame show, but that's about it.
That's what I said. You guys doing anything special for the bye week?
No, we'll have our normal content, everything other than the pregame, postgame. We'll do some self-scouting podcasts, some midseason award podcasts, things like that. We'll obviously have updates on transactions and injuries as well.
Very cool. Well, check out everything over at InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, tomorrow, Andrew will be here. Adam's back on Friday. Jeff, we'll talk to you on Monday, pal.
Take care, bud.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill.